Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. This morning's presenter needs no introduction. One of the better well-known golf professionals in all of Southern California, certainly over the course of my career, Mr. Andy Thuney, who the graduate of Cal State Fullerton, played college golf there, was the head professional at clubs such as Western Hills, Candlewood Country Club, and then the longtime head golf professional at Hacienda Golf Club, where he was served from 1983 all the way to 2008. 2008, he became the pro emeritus there, and joining us this morning to present on the history of the game. Mr. Thuney, welcome to the Catalyst webinar series.
Good morning to Ulaila. That's Scottish for good morning to everybody. I hope there's a small but enthusiastic crowd of listeners out there to go over a little history of the game. Hopefully we'll give you a few little nuggets of the history of the game. And you know, we're trying to cover 400 years of golf here. We're going to go from what we deem as the beginnings of the game all the way up until we formed the four majors and the Ryder Cup. So here we go. Our first picture, that's the Gloucester Cathedral in the mid 1300s. That's a stained glass window, which is showing obviously a young lad with a stick and a ball, and he's whacking that thing around somewhere. Now, there were many stick and ball games in the early 1400s. I'm going to show you a couple of them because the question is, how did we actually develop the game of golf? Where did it come from? Because there was a lot of similar stick and ball games. So here's an interesting one here. This is called Jeu de Mail. Now, this was a game that was played throughout Europe, actually. And I started with this one because you can see, if you see this picture, way off in the distance there, that looks like there's a good old country inn. So that's probably what became our 19th hole of today. You see this guy's about to hit a golf ball around the corner of the hill there and down into that valley. And they would just count the number of strokes that it took him to get there. And they would have matches, you know, alternating shots, maybe between him and a partner or just playing against a single person over there. And then their goal was to just get to that inn at the end of the round. There wasn't a hole in the ground, there wasn't a stake, there wasn't anything. They just went from point A to point B. So that was one of the games. There were several other games. One was called Paganica, which is similar. That was an Italian game. Chole was another game. And then there's this game here that's closer to our game of golf. This is called KOLVEN. Played in Holland, and you can see here a gentleman hitting a ball on ice. Most likely that was a wooden ball at that point in time, and it was kind of more like hockey maybe than golf. In fact, in the next slide that I'm going to show you here, there's a bunch of people, some playing hockey, some playing KOLVEN, and it looks like total chaos in this this thing, and you can see the windmill over there in the background. The interesting thing is that our word golf comes from the phrase KOLVEN, okay? K-O-L-V-E-N. Now, to kolb the ball in KOLVEN, K-O-L-B, was the method of striking the ball with the wooden club. And again, it was a wooden ball. So we're pretty sure that's where the name golf came from, the word KOLVEN, or to kolb the ball, okay? So that's how golf pretty much got from Holland to Scotland. Was the Dutch sea merchants would be playing this game when they landed in Scotland, and then the Scottish golfers or kolbers would say, oh, let's try that game, and then they knocked the ball around and maybe it went in a rabbit hole or something like that, and they decided they'd develop their own version of the game, which became our version of golf. That's the most commonly held version of how we came to the game of golf. Here's some early golf action. Those are the MacDonald boys. Now, the one on the left, obviously, is playing some golf. And he's got some pants on that kind of look like John Daly's loudmouth slacks that he wears today. And the MacDonald brother on the right obviously likes hunting more than he likes golf. All right, so You may have heard of Mary, Queen of Scots. Interesting lady. She's the one who kind of came up with our phrase, a caddie. She used to hire military cadets, as you can see those gentlemen that are holding her clubs to the right of her, to carry the golf clubs while she played golf, okay? So that's how the term caddie came about, military cadets. Now, she is also probably famous for being the first golf widower. Why do I say that? Well, her husband, Alfred Lord Darnley, was murdered, and sometime in the 1560s, and she was accused of out there playing golf or Pall Mall, which is a similar game to golf, while her husband had just been laid to rest. So not only was she the one that came up with the phrase caddie, but she was also perhaps the first golf widower. That's Mary, Queen of Scots. And then finally, we formed the first golfing club or company, the Honorable Company of Edinburgh Golfers. They were formed on the LEITH links in Scotland. This is William Inglis, who was their captain at the time, or their president at the time. And they were formed in, let's see, it was 1743. 1743 they were formed, and they had their first competitions in 1744. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But they played their first competition over LEITH Links, which was only a 5-hole golf course. All the holes were over 400 yards, which is interesting because the feathery golf ball, you could barely hit it 200 yards. So to make a hole in 5 was almost like a hole in 1 nowadays if you were that good a player. Now we'll get back to that in just a minute. Here's just a funny golf picture. Obviously they're searching for a ball in the gorse there. I put this in there because the first time I took a big group of Haciendans over to play Scotland, one of the gentlemen was our green committee chairman, and he happened to hit, we were playing Turnberry, and he happened to hit his tee shot into the gorse on this one hole, and his caddy Jimmy went over there and he saw the ball in this gorse bush. He reached in to get the ball out and scratched his arm. It was bleeding in a couple of places, and he put the ball down on a footpath, and he says, "Now, Doctor," he says, "you take your wedge and you pitch it back to the fairway and we'll press on from there, lad." And of course, the good doctor said, No. I didn't fly 7,000 miles to go over here and just pitch it back to the fairway. Give me my 5 wood. So with that, he rears back and he tops it right back in the same gorse bush. And now Jimmy, the caddy, looks at him, looks at the ball in the gorse bush, and he says, "Doctor," he says, "in faith, someone will find that one for you next February." So we just left the ball in the gorse bush and we pressed on. So I just thought I'd put that in there. If you ever played golf in Scotland, the caddies are the key to enjoying the game over there. All right, so here's the first international match, 1682. This was also played on the LEITH links, okay? That's, again, a course of only 5 holes. Now, understand that most golf courses back then were a variety of different number of holes. Prestwick had 12. At that time, St. Andrews actually had 11 out and 11 back for 22. We'll explain how we got to 18 holes here in just a minute. But you can see how rugged the bunkers were. And again, there's a caddy to the left there. And who's playing in this international match? Well, it's international because it's Scotland against England, of course. The Duke of York there hired John Patterson, who was a shoemaker, to play on his side. And of course, they whooped the Englishmen. And the phrase "far and sure" came about in that match. That was John Patterson's way of explaining that's how you want to hit the ball, far and sure. So that's a phrase that came about way back in the 1600s. So next we're going to look at, wow, what did golf balls look like way back then? Well, you've all heard of the feathery ball. You see that one on the bottom left there. It was sewn together kind of in the same manner that a modern baseball is, but it was filled with a hat full of feathers. They would wet down the feathers and then poke them into this thing. You see that kind of a metal unit up there that they would have the ball encased in. And then over in the right-hand side, you see that tool that looks like a small pick. They would poke the feathers into there. And then gradually they would expand as they dried out, but they couldn't expand beyond the confines of that metal plate over there on the left. So that was the first golf ball. And if you could hit it really, really good, you could hit about 200 yards. I've hit similar versions of that in some golf outings that we've done for Golf in the Kingdom a few years ago. And boy, they don't go very far. You get about, I would say, 60 to 70% of the distance that you might get with a modern golf ball. And then, of course, they invented the gutta percha ball, which is a rubber ball. And at first, they didn't realize that they had to put scorings on it to control where the ball went. So they would just kind of duck and weave and do all kinds of weird things until they finally put the lines and then the dimples and then the little, you see the one that's a square mesh, which is really later on after the 1900s came in. So that's what the golf balls look like. And I'm sure you've seen pictures of some golf clubs. All the way over on the left-hand side, you'll see what would have originally been a play club, which is the driver. That's what they called the driver, the play club. There was the play club, and then there'd be the brassy. There'd be all kinds of different cliques that they called them, and different clubs that you'd hit for different purposes. And then over on the right-hand side of the woods there, you see one that's a more modern persimmon type wooden driver. Over on the right-hand side of that frame, you'll see different irons. Now, it was really all the way up until the time that old Tom Morris and the gentleman who was really his, I would say, his mentor that started playing more in the way of irons. Their irons were originally designed just for the purpose of specialty shots. There was a rut iron for hitting a ball out of a rut that a wagon might make. There was a water iron that actually had a hole in the middle of it, so you could get the club through the water. There was all kinds of strange clubs, but most of those weren't used very often. Most of the clubs that were used were pretty much just wooden clubs to hit the ball all the way from the tee all the way to the green. So that's changed quite a bit over the years, obviously, and we've got more irons than we have woods for sure. All right, so here's the first competition, 1744. There's the captain of the Honorable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, and that's what that HCEG stands for. And the Silver Club. The Silver Club was the first trophy that we had in golf. And again, that competition was 3 rounds of 5 holes, and all the holes were 410 yards to 495 yards long, which was, again, quite a long hole to play a feathery. And the first winner was a guy by the name of John Rattray. He was a surgeon, so obviously he was a surgeon at golf too. So he won that first competition in 1744, and that Silver Club, I don't know if that's in the Royal and Ancient Clubhouse at St. Andrews or if it's still there in the town of Leith, but that's what it looked like, and they used to parade that around when the winner of that thing that would be his trophy. Okay, rules of golf. Now, originally there were only 13 rules. Very interesting. I'm going to tell you some of them, which are super interesting because they're similar to what we still have today. But the very first one's most unusual and leads to a couple of other tidbits of information. The first rule was tee the ball within 1 club length of the hole. Think about that. And how did you tee the ball? Well, back in those days, they literally pulled dirt or sand out of the hole, made a mound within 1 club length of the hole, and then whacked the ball off of that dirt or sand mound, and then tried to pat the dirt or sand back into the hole to reform the hole. So as you can imagine, the size of the hole was a bit arbitrary. How did we come up with the 4 1/4 inches that we have today? Well, that's a bit of a controversy. I had an old friend, he's at the big golf course in the sky now. His name is Dr. Archie Baird. He was a member at Muirfield in Gullin in Scotland. Still, I believe there is a museum next to the pro shop in Gullin with his name on it. And he maintains that he's pretty sure how we came up with the 4¼ inches diameter for a golf hole is that someone decided, well, with people reaching in and pulling dirt out of the hole and everything and making the hole oblong in different sizes, better come up with something that's pretty regular. So they cut off a piece of a drain spout and put that in the hole to make it a regular size. If you look at most drain spouts that you see, even to this day, that's about how wide they are, 4 to 5 inches wide. So he thinks that's where it came from. Very interesting tidbit of information about the size of the golf hole. A couple of other things in the rules. Rule 5, if your ball comes along any watery area or watery filth, you take it out, tee it up, play it with any club, and allow your adversary 1 stroke. So that would have been our penalty area rule that we still have today. So, but you notice that it says, allow your adversary 1 stroke. Almost everything was singles match play back in those days, just you against another golfer. So if you hit it in that watery area, then you gave your adversary an extra stroke, and that's how you played your match to get to that point. Here's another one that this would have been similar to, it's not actually a rule, but it's something we play commonly. If a ball be stopped by any person, horse, dog, or anything else, it must be played as it lies. Well, that's rubber the green, obviously, okay? That was actually rule 10. Rule 12, he whose ball lies farthest from the hole is obliged to play first, okay? That's the order of play etiquette. Now, this is interesting. This would have been our obstruction rule, if you will. Neither trench, ditch, dike, or made for presentation of the links or scholars' holes, I still don't know what they mean by scholars' holes, or soldiers' lines shall be accounted as a hazard. So they're not to be accounted as a hazard. The ball is to be taken out, teed, and played with any iron club. So there's your obstruction rule as we saw it way back in 1744. Interesting that some of those rules still parallel the ones that we have today, only we have a lot more rules today, obviously, because the game has gotten a little bit more complicated. All right, so now you know about the beginnings of the rules of the game, 1744. How about the first Open Championship? Played in 1860 at Prestwick Golf Club. Now you heard that that first competition that was at the LEITH links was only 3 rounds of 5 holes or 15 holes. Well, interestingly enough, Prestwick only had 12 holes back then. So the first Open Championship, which was won by Willie Park in 1860, was 3 rounds of 12 holes played in one day, so 36 holes. And it was that way for a couple of years, okay, until it was moved to the old course at St. Andrews. Now, the old course at St. Andrews, well, it didn't have 5 holes. It didn't have 12 holes. It actually had 22 originally, 11 out and 11 back. Actually, it had 11, but you played the same holes in the reverse process coming back in. For those of you that have played St. Andrews, you know that there are some bunkers out there that when you play some of those holes, they're facing the opposite direction. I want to say it's like hole 13. There's a couple of bunkers out there that you can't see from the tee. And your caddy will tell you, actually, maybe don't hit it in the fairway because you might hit one of those bunkers. But what they used to do is play 11 out and 11 back. And then finally they decided, I think it was in 1764, they cut it to 18 holes. They did that because they reduced the first, or actually they eliminated the first 4 holes by reducing 2. So that cut it back from 22 to 18, and that's actually how we came to the standard of 18 holes of golf today. From the old course of St. Andrews, which was originally 11 out and 11 back, 22 became 18. Okay, the trophies for the Open Championship, the jug and the belt. Well, you probably heard this story about young Tom Morris, who won the tournament 3 years in a row, okay? So after he won it 3 years in a row, they decided the tradition was that if someone could win it 3 years in a row, the trophy then was the belt that you see on the right. They would retire the belt and he could keep the belt. Well, they had to come up with a new trophy. So they didn't play it for the next year. And after they didn't play for the next year, they decided we got to come up with a different trophy. So that's when they came up with the claret jug, which is today still the trophy for the Open Championship. Just curious, how many of you know how many multiple winners there have been for the Open Championship? Well, there's actually four-time winners, the British Open, Old Tom and Young Tom both won it 4 times, okay? There was a triumvirate of players. Let's see if that's my next slide. No, there's Old Tom and Young Tom, who each won it 4 times, Old Tom on the left and Young Tom on the right. And if you've never seen the movie or read the book, Tommy's, I think it's called Tommy's Glory, something like that. He died basically of a broken heart because his wife died in childbirth. And I think he died on Christmas Day, which is a very, very sad story. But he was quite a young golfer. And obviously his dad was kind of his apprentice. Here's another interesting picture of a group of guys. Well, I tell you, okay, how many people won the British Open many multiple times? Old Tom and Young Tom won it 4 times each. The triumvirate, which I'll get to in a minute, VARDON, BRAID, and Taylor won it 16 times between them. Taylor 5 times, BRAID 5 times, and VARDON 6 times. Walter Hagen won it 4 times. Bobby Locke, who's a little-known professional, won it 4 times. Peter Thompson, of course, won it 5 times. Tom Watson won it 5 7/8 times, I would say. He almost won it when he was 59 years old, as we all recall. Now, this picture here, this is interesting. The guy in the middle, Allan Robertson, was the mentor to Old Tom Morris, way over on the left-hand side. So the guy in the middle that's holding all the golf clubs underneath his left arm was actually what we would commonly call the first golf professional. He was a club maker and a ball maker. Made most of his money on making making feathery golf balls. Feathery golf balls were a very painstaking process. You could only make 4 or 5 golf balls in a day's work. So they almost cost as much as a golf club to make and almost took as much time to make as a golf ball. He and Old Tom Morris, way over on the left-hand side, had a bit of an argument about the fact that Old Tom started playing the gutta-percha ball when he was playing in competitions. So they would play in competitions together. In fact, their biggest one was against 2 brothers called the Dunn brothers. And they played them one time. They played them a match for 400 pounds. Now, back in those days, in the 1850s and 60s, 400 pounds, that was probably like $10,000 or maybe even $20,000 in today's money. So that was quite a big match. But they played against these other guys, and that's how they made some of their side money. Obviously, it was these matches that the dignitaries would set up against other pseudo-professionals or good amateur golfers. So again, that's Allan Robertson in the middle and Old Tom over there on the left-hand side. So here is the triumvirate, VARDON, BRAID, and Taylor. And that's Harry VARDON hitting the ball there. BRAID and Taylor sitting and standing. Harry VARDON, if you've seen the movie The Greatest Game Ever Played, he and Ted Ray were in the playoff against Francis Ouimet. We'll have a picture of them in just a minute here. In 1913, Harry VARDON was called the stylist, and he was also the developer of the overlapping grip. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute as well. But between those 3 guys, from the years, let's see, for a 20-year period, they won 16 Opens from the period from 1894 to 1914. They won 16 of 20 Open championships. So was really quite something. And that was the first triumvirate of golf. You know, there's been several modern triumvirates, you know, Snead, Hogan, and Nelson, I would say would definitely be one. And then maybe, you know, there's been a couple of modern ones that have been probably as well recognized. So there's Walter Hagen. Now, he was the first American to win the Open Championship in 1922. Before that, it was, you know, all Scottish and British players, because most of us are Americans, couldn't even go over there. So that was the reason why we didn't have too many Americans competing in the Open Championship. So how did golf get to the U.S.? Well, what did it look like when it first got to the United States? That's the Apple Tree Gang. This was a little teeny golf course that was next to somebody's house in Yonkers, New York. And just a couple, 3 holes is all it was. And you can see that the stick is only about 3 feet high. And it's only playing in a, so that was the beginnings of golf in the U.S. So when was the United States Golf Association formed? Okay, 1894. And the interesting thing was, and the first president was a guy by the name of Theodore Havermeyer, and that's why the trophy for the U.S. Open is called the Havermeyer Trophy. Okay, and they had 2 championships that first year, and it was kind of unsettled as to which one of them was the official championship. So they replayed it in 1895, okay? And it was at Newport Country Club. And that was where Havermeyer was the president of the club. And it kind of formed the club. And the 2 winners were, on the left, C.B. McDonald, Charles Blair McDonald, who became a famous golf course architect as well. On the right, Horace Rawlins, okay? So Horace Rawlins won the Open Championship, and C.B. McDonald won the Amateur Championship. So that was after they settled it the first year. That they figured that wasn't an official competition, so that this became the official competition. And there's the famous trio. That's Francis Ouimet in the middle. He was the first U.S. born amateur to win the U.S. Open Championship. On the left was Harry Vardon, and on the right is Ted Ray, the pipe smoker. And as you recall the story, Greatest Game Ever Played, and it's a wonderful movie if you've never seen it, or a great book to read as well. He lived right across the street from Brookline Country Club, where it was played. And it's quite a poignant story. And Harry Vardon was suffering from some delusions at that point in his life, because when he was brought up, he had some things happen to his family back in the Isle of Jersey, where he was born. Okay, PGA of America is born 1916. You all should know this story. Who was Rodman Wanamaker? Well, he owned a big department store in New York, and he loaned the beginners of our association the use of a room upstairs, a meeting room, so that our predecessors could get together. The first president was Robert White, and Robert White, interestingly enough, was a school teacher from Scotland. He emigrated to the U.S., and after becoming a school teacher, he decided he wanted to get involved in the game of golf. And he was not only the greenskeeper at several different golf courses, but the professional. And as you know, even way back in the era of old Tom Morris and young Tom Morris, you couldn't just be a golf professional. You kind of had to be the greenskeeper as well. You had to be a jack of all trades. And many of our fellow professionals are still jack of all trades to this day, not necessarily all the greenskeeper as well, but doing several other things just to make ends meet and keeping our clubs running. But that's Rodman Wanamaker, who loaned us the use of the room where the original Constitution was signed, and that's how our association was first gotten underway, Robert White being the very first president of the PGA of America, okay? Now, the trophy itself, there it is. It's a big trophy, and I got a kick out of Colin Morikawa. You all saw the PGA Championship this last week, I'm sure. That is a big trophy. If you've ever seen it, when you pick it up, you think, well, this thing's got to be one solid piece. Well, the crown does come off, and it came off right in his hands, which I thought was really, really kind of fun. And what a great win that was. What a great win. That's Jim Barnes on the left. He won the very first PGA Championship, October 10th through 14th at Sewanee Country Club in 1916 in New York, and it was that one interesting was stroke play, but then became match play all the way up until the year 1958. Here's an interesting tidbit of information. The guy who lost the last year of match play in 1957 won the first year of stroke play. And that was none other than Dow Finsterwald. That's kind of an interesting caveat, if you will, to lose the last one of match play and win the first one of stroke play. Okay, now I'm jumping around here a little bit because we got a lot of area to cover in just maybe another 10 minutes or so. In fact, while you're looking at this picture of Harry Vardon and Glennicolette VARE, I kind of skipped over something, and I want to do this real quickly. Where does the term "for" come from? In 1457, King James II banned the playing of golf and football because he thought it was detracting from the military practicing archery. Okay, and other things that the military had to do. So this comes to mind, the term "for." Where in the world did that come from? Well, if you've seen any engagements way back in those years when you had foot soldiers and archers, the archers were behind the foot soldiers, and preceding the advance of the foot soldiers, the archers would fire their arrows up over their own foot soldiers into the enemy lines. And as they did that, they would yell, "To the fore," which means, our guys, keep your head down, keep back, because we're firing arrows over your head. So that's where our term "for" came from. Not from anything else that you might have imagined, but just because of archers firing arrows over the head of advancing infantrymen. And King James having banned the playing of golf way back in 1457 because he wanted people not to be playing golf. He wanted them to be working on their archery skills. All right, back to the Vardon and VARE trophies. As you may know, those are the two trophies for the lowest scoring average on the PGA Tour and the LPGA Tour. So we know who Harry Vardon was. Who was Glennicolette VARE? She won 6 women's U.S. amateurs, 6 of them. Nobody's ever won that many women's U.S. amateurs, okay? There were several other gals who won several of them, okay? Joanne Gunderson Carner won 5, and the Curtis sisters, Harriet and Margaret, won 4 between them. And that's where the name of the ladies, if you will, international match play format came for women amateurs, is now called the Curtis Cup. That was for the Curtis sisters, who won 4 women's amateurs between them. But that's Glennicolette VARE, who won 6 of them. So that's why the LPGA lowest scoring average trophy is named after her. And of course, Harry Vardon started the Vardon grip, which is the overlapping grip that probably, I would say, the most prevalent grip in golf today, although some of the best golfers use the interlocking grip, as we know. Okay, the Ryder Cup. How did that get started? Well, that's Samuel Ryder on the left and George Duncan on the right. Interestingly enough, there's pictures of George Duncan in the clubhouse at Hacienda because he put on an exhibition there after he was one of the first players in the Ryder Cup in the 1920s. There was actually a pseudo Ryder Cup in 1926 that was played in England at Wentworth Golf Club, but that was just kind of an informal match since some of our U.S. players were over there playing in the Open Championship. Next year in 27 was actually the first official Ryder Cup that was played at Worcester Country Club in Massachusetts. And that was the first official one in 1927. This is a picture of the proceedings in 1929. And it looks to me like the Brits must have won it because George Duncan is being presented the trophy from Samuel Ryder, who was a seed salesman, a grass seed salesman, who donated the trophy and also some money to help get the event underway. And if you've ever seen that trophy, I think it's only 16 inches high. And on top of it, there is a little golfer, and that golfer's name is Abe Mitchell. Abe Mitchell was Mr. Ryder's coach, his golf coach, and also played on the very first Ryder Cup team for the British. Okay. All right. Well, here's another tournament that's coming up soon, going to be played this fall. Very interestingly, that's going to be played this fall. At first, it was called the Annual Invitational Tournament at Augusta National Golf Club. Now it's called the Masters, of course. It was called that only the first 2 years of its playing in 34 and 35. Who won it in 1934? Well, you're looking at him right there. That's Horton Smith, okay? Horton Smith used to be the name on our professional development award, and now it's just called the Professional Development Award. But Horton won the very first Masters. And here's an interesting trivia question if you ever want to ask somebody a question about the Masters. What two players won the Masters in the first time they competed at the Masters? Well, obviously Horton Smith, because that was the first Masters. The other one, Frank Urban Zeller. He won it the first time he played in the Masters. So that's a trivia question you can ask your buddies when we get to Augusta in this fall. And it's too bad they're not going to allow patrons on the golf course. I would love to see what that golf course looks like in the fall. It's absolutely gorgeous in the spring, but it should be interesting to see what happens this fall. And there's a picture of the 12th hole of probably one of the prettiest golf courses in the US of A. If you get there in the spring and you haven't been there sometime, you got to go. You absolutely got to go. As a fellow PGA professional, that is something that you ought to put on your agenda. John, you still there?
Yes, sir, I'm here. That wow, I mean, it was like you know, I composed the quiz for the members that take the Catalyst for points after the fact, and usually I compose the quiz during the webcast. But I was taking notes. I haven't taken notes like this since I was in college. I've got a bunch of stuff down here and some questions for you, Andy. Did Rodman Wanamaker have any affiliation with the PGA of America other than running that building or owning that building?
None that I'm aware of. He was just friends with Robert White and the other gentleman who signed first on the Constitution. I assume he was a golfer, but he owned that big, huge department store, and that's where they decided to meet. So that was the relationship between him and the PGA.
And Horton Smith, I had heard that he had won the first two Masters. That's not correct?
Not the first two. He won 34 and 36, if memory serves me. And I think it might have been Herman Kaiser that won in 35. I don't have that in front of me, but yeah, he won 2 out of the first 3. I'm almost certain.
And can you revisit the claret jug and the belt? The belt was the first award, or can you revisit that whole thing?
Yeah.
How did that come about? How did you get the belt? The belt was before the jug, or you got the jug if you won 3 in a row?
Good question. All right. 1860 was the very first Open Championship at Prestwick, 3 rounds of 12. The belt was the award, okay? And they had established that if any player won the event 3 years in a row, that they would keep the belt. Well, the first couple of years, old Tom won it. And then young Tom won it. Let's see, it would have been, I want to say 64, 5, and 6. Yeah, I think 1864, 5, and 6. He won it 3 years in a row. And so they retired the belt. He got to keep it. They didn't have a championship in 67, and then the jug became the trophy from 68 and on. So that's the genesis of that. And interestingly enough, one of the years that young Tom won it, when they were playing at Prestwick, originally the first hole was a par 6. And if you play Prestwick, they'll explain to you where that hole was laid out. It now would be a conglomeration of 2 holes that are near the clubhouse. This par 6, playing with a feathery, he made a 3, which is a double eagle on a par 6 hole, made a 3. Now this hole was over 600 yards long. Hitting a feathery 3 times into a hole 600 yards away is quite a feat, because it's, like I said earlier, it's tough to hit a feathery 200 yards to begin with. But yeah, that's how the belt was retired and the jug became the trophy.
Now, I actually have a picture. Tony Latendre sent me over a picture of you in front of that boardroom on Broadway. I'm trying to see if
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm gonna try to pull it up right now. There it is.
Yep.
That's Andy Thuney in front of that boardroom where Wanamaker allowed the first meeting of the PGA of America to come together.
Yeah, we had our annual meeting there, well, in 2016. So Tony and I hopped on a cab and went down to the department store there area and took a look at that boardroom. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question that came in here from Dave Conforti. Sarazen won in 35, courtesy of his 2 on 15. At the PGA Championship he's talking about?
No, that'd be the Masters. That was the Masters. Yeah, I think, yeah, it might have been. I don't know if Sarazen, I don't have that in front of me, so I don't know what year, but that was the year that he fired the shot heard around the world. He made a 2 on hole number 15. And he might be right. That might have been 35. Yeah, and then Herman Kaiser might have won it in 37 or later. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have all those dates in front of me. But that Dave he might be correct.
Andy, I just switched the screen back to you. I think you need to accept it.
There you go.
There we go. And let me see what else I got here. Okay, so you have taken a group of Haciendans over to play Prestwick and several others over there. I'm sure you didn't do it just once. Can you talk a little bit about that trip or those trips and maybe where else you played on those voyages?
Oh boy, that first trip was an absolute riot, John. We had 44 members that went with us to Scotland, Ireland, and England. And I'll tell you a cute story about getting started. Thank goodness the tour guide had told us to put these rainbow colored ribbons on all of our luggage because we were told you got your golf clubs and 1 suitcase, 2 pieces of luggage. That's it. Well, obviously, out of the 44 people, there was another 4 people that decided, oh, I need 1 more piece of luggage. So there were. Why do I know that there were 92 pieces of luggage? When we got to LAX, our tour guide in this end inadvertently said, tag everybody to Kennedy instead of telling them tag them on to Edinburgh, Scotland. So we got halfway through tagging everybody, and then one Skycap said, no, wait a minute. I thought you said you're going to Scotland. Yeah. Well, you only told us to tag him to Kennedy. He says, we got a problem here. So who's going to be your lead man when you get to Kennedy? Well, they pointed to me, and they said, okay, I'm going to tell the captain of the aircraft, they're going to have to let him off, and he's going to have to identify all of the luggage so that they can reload that and keep it in one area and get it right over to the aircraft going on to Edinburgh, because they're not going to be tagged through to Edinburgh. So I had to literally get off the aircraft, get on the tarmac, and identify, thankfully, 92 pieces of luggage that had these rainbow colored ribbons on them. We didn't miss 1 piece of luggage, thank goodness. But 88 people was like herding cats for the 2 weeks that we're over there. But we had a blast. We played all the major courses in Scotland. All of us got on the old course, which is very, very unusual. Nowadays, it's difficult to get on the old course. You're better off taking a smaller group and just basically going there early in the morning and just saying, here, we're a twosome or a single or whatever, get us off whenever you can, because it's been so impacted with golfers. It might not be as bad now because of COVID, but it's been very impacted. But if you get over there, you got to play the old course. It's truly unique, and you got to play Prestwick because that's where the original Open was played. And once you get a chance to play it, you'll say, "Wow, how did they convert this into 18 holes from just 12?"
So Prestwick is it's not still 12 holes, is it?
Oh no, it's 18 holes. But your caddy will explain to you how the original 12 holes were laid out, and especially that first hole, which was that par 6 that young Tom made the 3 on, one of the years that he won the championship. Yeah, the first hole at Prestwick's an absolute riot. It's just a short par 4. You'd probably hit just a hybrid or an iron off the tee and then a short iron into the green. But right along the right-hand side, I mean, 15 feet to your right is a big wall, a brick wall, and then there's a railroad station over there. So if you slice your tee shot 10 yards, you're gone. So you have to play way left just to be safe. And even, as most people know, I only hit the ball right to left. Even I was afraid of hitting it to the right on that hole.
And to shift over to something you said about Mary, Queen of Scots. So you said she was potentially the first golf widower. Did she or did she not have a hand in her husband's death?
I'm afraid I don't know that much about history. I don't believe she had a hand in her husband's death. But I'd have to research that one for you, John, and get back to you.
Okay, so for everybody that's on the webcast this morning, thanks for being here today. The quiz, lucky for all you attendees, the quiz is no longer required for the MSR point, because I have a feeling today's quiz is going to be quite difficult in comparison to how we usually shape those up. Andy, thank you very much for putting this together. Truly a wealth of information, and you know, I hope I don't make you feel uncomfortable when I say that you are an absolute treasure for the Southern California section of the PGA, and we are very grateful on behalf of the Education Committee that you have come on to put this together for us today. If anybody has any further questions relating to Andy's presentation or the history of the game, according to Andy Thuney, his email will be on the YouTube recording of this morning's presentation that I'll be sending out here later on today. Have any questions, I'm sure feel free to reach out to Andy, and he'd be happy to answer if he has the answer. Mr. Thuney, anything else for the attendees before we sign off?
No, John, it's been my pleasure. I hope everybody picked up a few little bon mots about the history of the game. Obviously, I skimmed over a lot of things and would like to have covered a lot of other stuff about women's golf as well, but time did not permit us to go into too much detail about other parts of the history of the game. But it's been fun working with you, John, and I appreciate all the hard work you've done to put all these Catalyst webinars together. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. My pleasure. Truly my pleasure. Okay, everybody, thank you as usual for supporting the Catalyst webinar series. And next week we have the Vice President of Player Development for Club Corp that's going to be coming on talking about a new role that Club Corp has just rolled out. I'll get his name here right. I want to make sure I don't mispronounce it. Matt Anzalone, Vice President for Player Development for Club Corp, is going to be coming on talking about the importance of that role in growing golf and growing club membership in the future. Once again, thank you, Andy. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Have a great day. Stay safe.